So let me tell you about our speaker we're really privileged to have with us today, Triffon Alatzas. He was named publisher and editor-in-chief of the Baltimore Sun Media Group back in March in 2016. He's been an award-winning reporter and editor for the past 27 years. And what's really interesting, I had a chance to talk to him at lunchtime, and business people will appreciate this. He started off as an intern with the Evening Sun paper way back when. And who remembers the Evening Sun paper? Anybody? I was a paper boy for the Evening Sun way back then, so I remember that. And in the state of Maryland, he was named one of the most influential people in 2016. We hope that transferred over to 2017. I guess we'll hear about it. But that was in 2016. Born in Baltimore, grew up in Baltimore County, resides in Harford County now with his wife and 2 kids, has a master's degree in public affairs with the University of Illinois, bachelor's degree in communications from locally here at Loyola University, and also Calvert Hall High School.
All right, go.
So he's a local boy that makes good. He has definitely made good. And the format here is, again, I'm going to ask a series of questions for about 15, 20 minutes. I know from talking to people, there's a lot of questions, so we're going to open it up to the audience after that. Triff, with so many news options today, why is a local newspaper still so important here?
Well, before I answer, just thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks to many of you for coming out and spending some time. I hope I can answer your questions. Obviously, I'm biased. I believe a local newspaper is extremely important. Just to be blunt, I mean, you look at the Baltimore Sun for 180 years. This year we celebrated our 180th year in May, so you're all in business and you know sort of how difficult that is. Somebody talked about digital disruption, and we've all been through that, and we're all there. And Renee, our marketing director who's here, she's heard me say this so many different times. Think about how you the things you do differently than you did 5 years ago with technology, how you bank today, how you make a reservation at a restaurant, how you check in at the airport, how you watch television and movies, and of course how you consume your news has changed, and we've evolved that way. So why a local newspaper is important? We at the Sun for 180 years have had the motto, light for all, transparency across the spectrum. And you've seen the Washington Post these days has a new slogan they call democracy dies in darkness. And again, to be blunt, I believe without, that democracy essentially dies without a vibrant press. And I think you've seen over the years that the media has changed, but our mission has never changed. And a local newspaper, let's just think about, and I'm going to try not to call us a newspaper, because we decided many years ago that we weren't going to be in the newspaper business, but they were going to be in the news information business. And so we like to call ourselves a news organization because we're not just in print. And so while many people say, hey, it's great you've been around 180 years, sometimes that's difficult because some people only think of you as a newspaper. And you all know that we have many different ways to deliver news. We have more audience. We have a larger audience than we've ever had, thanks to this so many different ways to do it. But when you think about the news you're getting today, you talked about so many options. When you look at the Sun's investment, thanks to people like you as subscribers and advertisers, we have more journalists than anyone else in this region. You could add all of my friends in television and radio and websites, add all of those journalists together, and you wouldn't have as many as the Sun has. And so while you see many different news options, dare I say that much of that news is coming because the Sun made the investment to cover it, and then television covered it, radio covered it. And if we weren't there to cover it, I don't think enough would be covered. We have close to 200 journalists covering the 5-county area. No one has made that investment. And again, it's because of the support of people like you. So I hope that answers your question.
But along the same line, we hear, I see my kids, they don't read the newspapers. A lot of people don't read newspapers.
Yeah.
What's the future? Is the Sun going to continue to print a daily newspaper? I know everything's digital and people are moving in different directions.
Sure. Now, great question. People ask me it all the time. I certainly believe that we will print for many, many, many years. I think a lot of it depends on the market. And you're right. A lot of people read our news on their phones. A lot of people read our news through social media. A lot of people read it in print. What happens in terms of the future, in terms of the print operation, in terms of online, we've kind of decided that we're going to deliver news where and when you want it. And we have all these great tools to do it, but again, our mission remains the same. We promise you every day that we're going to cover Baltimore and Maryland better than anyone else. That's our promise to you, and that's what we strive to do every day. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I think what we'll decide how long we print, and essentially it'll come down to the demand. And you know, what happens is sometimes things just get said so much that sometimes people think they're true. And people say, well, no one reads newspapers. And again, we're a news organization, and I tell you, so Renee will help me with the numbers, but we have 1 million readers each week through our products. 8 out of 10 households receive a printed product from us in the 5-county area. We have more readers than we've ever had because of social media, because of the phones, because of so many opportunities to deliver the news. Where it used to be, we published once a day. Of course, with the Evening Sun, we published twice a day. But that used to be our sort of our routine. We got up in the morning and we worked on the news, and we worked on it for a deadline of essentially 10 o'clock in the morning for the Evening Sun, and then 10 o'clock at night for the Morning Sun. And those were kind of the 2 train stops. And now it's all the time, as you know. And I think that's a great thing. Again, it's the digital disruption, and all of our businesses have been through that and continue to evolve with it. And we still will. But fortunately, I mean, we are a very successful business. We are a manufacturer. A lot of people like to forget that, but we manufacture a product every single day. We deliver, I think it was 250,000 miles last year that we went out. Our on-time rate was 91%, 92%. So we have a lot of expertise in doing this. And then, of course, if you want your news immediately and you want it, through your phone, it's there too. We do have, you mentioned, paid digital subscriptions. Really proud of that. We're one of the first news organizations to do it. It's really helped us, as you know, online. There are competing business models, especially with advertising. Paid subscribers versus non-paid subscribers. We have options for both, and we've been very successful there. We're really proud of that.
So if you talk about social media and its impact, talk a little bit more about that. You know, how has it really impacted journalism, and what is the future of that with respect to your organization?
Yeah, and I can't wait to talk to some of the people who are in that business as well afterwards. But social media has opened up audiences for us that we just wouldn't have had. It's really provided a mechanism in terms of delivering news to people so many different ways. And some people, that's essentially how they get their news. They look at those headlines. So that's the good part about it. Obviously, the challenge is that there is so much out there, and it's so fast that what can you believe? And certainly, when you see something that from a Baltimore Sun account, it's going to have the same standards that we put for when we publish something. And so if you see something on the Baltimore Sun account or one of our reporters, it's held to the same standards that we have had for 180 years. And that means you should have 2 sources. That means that you know where the information came from. When we make a mistake, we say so. Those are great challenges. That, I think, sets us apart from our competitors, from people who perhaps do not have the reputation, the trust, the integrity that we've built up. And again, we're not perfect. When we make a mistake, we own it, we say so. But you know that you'll be able to hold us accountable. We're not some machine that you can't talk to. I'm here, my reporters are on the street, my sales reps, you know us. We're about building relationships in Baltimore and in the region. I think that's what sets us apart from others that we compete against around the globe for things. But I think that's how social media has changed things and created those kinds of challenges. And there's a lot of pressure to deliver information quickly. But of course, when it comes to our news organization, it needs to be right. And so you expect that from us, and when you see it, when you see something on Facebook, and sometimes it's difficult to see where that's coming from, it says BaltimoreSun.com on it, you know that there's something there that you can trust. Now, you may read it and say, hey, they got this wrong, but again, you can hold us accountable rather easily, and you can get to us quickly. And then the other thing with social media, it used to be, this is another plus, I think, used to be that we write a story, you would have to write a letter to the editor, you would need to mail it, maybe it would get in, it would get screened, it would take a week before it was in. You know, now you can react immediately to one of our stories. You can send an email to the reporter, you can react immediately on Twitter, you can add a comment to the bottom of the story. Really has given sort of engagement with the user. It's become much more of a relationship with the user than we've ever had before.
Interestingly, you talked about, quote unquote, some mistakes that are made in the
Yeah.
media. You know, our current president
Sure.
talks a lot about the news media and fake news.
Right.
Tell us about what are your thoughts on some of these comments, and and how do people know what is fake and what is real? I mean, what's the line of
Yeah.
demarcation? I mean,
Yeah.
how do they know?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I don't think you'll be surprised at what I think of when the president says that everything is fake news. So certainly presidents and the press have had a love-hate relationship for generations. This is not new. And I tell a lot of my friends this often. I point out that President Obama certainly had really taken the press to account for things that people don't think about. But there was, the president had challenged the New York Times, essentially threatened to throw a reporter in jail if they didn't give up their source, which they didn't, and they backed off. But that's the kind of chilling thing that we in the press, we believe everything should be transparent. Obviously, there are secrets and things that we, of course, believe in terms of when, if there's an NSA issue or something like that. But we also believe in whistleblowers who are trying to get information out, and that can make, transparent. We believe transparency is the way it should be. Light for all is our motto. President Trump often says that he doesn't like the media or that it's fake news. And typically, it comes when it's stories that he doesn't like.
Right.
Now, it's fair for the president to challenge the media when they're wrong. It's fair for him to disagree. That's his right. But you need a vibrant press to hold government accountable. When you don't have that, we all know historically the trouble that creates. And so I think that sometimes I think it's amazing. I mean, here we have a president who essentially, look at his career. He loves the media. He has become essentially who he is because of the media, and he has done a very good job in many ways of manipulating the media. So I think some of it's a little bit of back and forth, and he likes to use the press as a punching bag, and again, that's fair. He's not the first president to do that. But I do, I am disappointed when it's a story that he doesn't like, and he immediately says it's fake news. How do you tell the difference between fake news and real news? Again, look at the source. I get this question a lot, and it really is a great question, and you're all very, savvy news consumers. But I've caught myself where I'll see a headline, and I'm like, wait a minute, and then I'll look at I always say, look at the date. Always look at the source. Look to see at the URL, and if it sounds too good to be true, maybe you go to another browser and check the source to make sure. I mean, we do this all the time in our line of work because you see so many things that are out there, and oh my gosh, is it something that's brand new that we don't know about? I think I've gotten pretty good at it. It's kind of difficult on some social media to sort of dig through to see who the author is. Another thing we've looked for is if you don't see quotes in the story sometimes, maybe perhaps it's old archived material. So I think there's a lot of different ways you have to do it. You have to do it quickly, but always sort of go through, look at your source to make sure. I tell this story often that many years ago, we had the Ray Rice scandal in Baltimore. You all remember. And the day that he was arrested, or the night he was arrested, we started getting tips, as a lot of news organizations did, and we couldn't confirm it. So certainly, as the Baltimore Sun, this is the Baltimore Raven, as I told my staff, hey, this has got to be right. We can't just run with this, but we had a lot of competition. We knew many of our competitors were on it. So we worked on the story all night, couldn't get it confirmed. Next day, I remember Googling to see if anybody had it, and there was one message board. There was a gentleman who had posted on a message board, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said something like, my cousin's friend works at a casino and said that he was arrested. So certainly that's not enough for us to go with it. Obviously, our competitors were looking at that, and they weren't going with it. We had a reporter who we were sending to Atlantic City to check it out, and he had checked with a source and ended up finding out who Ray Rice's attorney was, got the story confirmed, and I guess it was a Sunday. It was late in the day, and I remember reading the story before it went out, and again, I Googled and saw it nowhere. But as soon as we posted the story, within 10 minutes, the story was everywhere by everybody else, but saying, the Baltimore Sun says Ray Rice was arrested. And it really sort of took my breath away to see, because again, Baltimore Sun is a reputable news organization. As soon as somebody saw that the Baltimore Sun said it, then everybody went with it. And before, it was only out there in that one other place, and so that's sort of created sort of the dilemma that you see in the news media today, in that, if somebody else reports it and we do it ourselves, hey, even though a reputable news organization has reported it, have we done our own reporting to check it out? And you do as much as you can before you sort of pick up on it, but there's a lot of that in the media, and we need to be held accountable for it, and that's very important. And again, the president has every right to hold us accountable. He should. But if he doesn't like a story, it doesn't mean it's fake news. That's what I think.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
It's sort of like the halo effect. It's Baltimore Sun, it's a reputable organization. They said this, so therefore it's
Correct.
good. Same
And
thing.
we've worked hard at that, and so therefore it's important for us to keep at that. And again, you know us, you know our standards. Those standards have been in place for a long time. So we take that very seriously.
From a business perspective,
Yeah.
Triff, the Sun is owned by a public company.
Correct.
How does that affect things?
Sure,
In
yeah.
terms of management, in terms of
Right.
business day to day, and so
Sure.
forth.
Yeah, we're owned by a company called Tronc, formerly known as Tribune Publishing. We own many news organizations, including the Los Angeles Times, Chicago Tribune, newspapers in Florida, the South Florida Sun-Sentinel, the Orlando Sentinel, so the Hartford Courant. I know I'm from San Diego Union Tribune, so I'm sorry. I have friends who work there who I'm forgetting some of those publications. We at the Sun also own the Annapolis Capital. We own two other daily newspapers, again, news organizations, and the Carroll County Times. We also own 30 other titles, Towson Times, the Aegis in Hartford County, Howard Magazine, Hartford Magazine, and many other titles. So having a public company like that, Tronc is obviously a very large company. They don't tell us what to publish. Those decisions are made locally. We use the news organization across the country. So if something happens in LA, you're likely to see an LA Times story. We have a Washington bureau, which is staffed with a reporter from the Sun who covers Maryland issues. But then we have somebody who covers the White House. We tend to use those articles. Obviously, we have access to many articles across the wires. But then again, in terms of a business standpoint, for advertising, if you advertise with us, you can also buy across the company. We have obviously very large cities that we have great relationships with advertisers and certainly reach lots of people. And many of you know, when you have corporate offices that are elsewhere, they help us with back office and certainly lots of buying power and those kinds of things. We were talking about that earlier. But there's no sort of decisions as to what goes on the front page. Those decisions are made by editors here. No decisions in terms of what kind of advertising. Our advertising department is based here. They're working with clients in the Baltimore region. We do have a national office in New York, of course, and Chicago, and in LA, and elsewhere for national clients that want to be in the Baltimore market, that want to be in Virginia market, that want to be in California. We, as a digital operation, can sell advertising to essentially in any market, as many of you know. Really has opened up lots of opportunities, a lot of investments in technology for our advertising efforts. Again, we one of the hurdles we have in advertising is telling people we're more than a newspaper. They think of us as a newspaper first. Clients who say, oh yeah, I use you digitally, are always pleased, always, are always very complimentary of our of the ROI that they get from using us. And so our challenge is, hey, we can sell you mobile marketing solutions. We have B2B. We, of course, have consumer. Certainly, print advertising is popular because of the longevity of it. You print it, and it's there. And certainly, you have a lot of advertisers who still look to weekend newspapers because of inserts. And, we talk a lot. People say, people don't read newspapers. We do see a lot of success on weekends where people really want to engage with a product. And then we also have something called the e-newspaper, which is a replica of the day's paper. It's emailed to your box every day at 5:30. It's much more popular than I had thought it would be when we started it, because it's essentially the newspaper, but you can turn the page, you can react, you can engage with the advertising. We put all the late scores in it, so we have earlier deadlines, so if somebody wants to see the Orioles score, that's all in there, and it's really done very well. It's one of our most popular products, and so there's a lot of investments that we get from the conglomerate that helps across the company, and certainly we've seen some efforts. But the question I get all the time is, does somebody in Chicago, which is where we're headquartered, does somebody tell you what editorial policy to have? And that never happens. And as I always say, I'm guessing that everybody in this room hasn't agreed with every story that we've done or every editorial stance that we've taken. But again, to your first question, I think that's why you need a local news organization that you invest in, because when there's times of crisis, when there's times of joy, you need a mechanism where people can go that they can trust. And certainly that happened during the unrest. I tell the story that a few days after the unrest, there was a peaceful protest coming up Calvert Street. And it shut down traffic, and my office window overlooks Calvert Street, so I saw the entire peaceful protest coming up the street, and I was looking out my window, so my window's there, and I see this protest, and then I had one of the cable channels on, and there was smoke and fire, and and it was from a couple of days ago, but what was happening outside my window was the news, but obviously what I was watching on television was a little different, and it really sort of showed the importance to me, of local press, and how important it is to have the context and the relationships. And we know the people in Baltimore, and we could tell that story, we believe, better than anybody else.
Final question I have. Again, it sounds like there's a lot of strength behind you from a corporate perspective, which is great. But the final question I have, what is the future? What's the future for newspapers?
Yeah, I think the future's fine. Steve Davis and I were talking earlier, what do you tell future generations who want to go into journalism? And, I think it's an exciting time. There is a lot of change. There is a lot of turmoil, but that's not new into any business. And you think about all the businesses that aren't here anymore that didn't sort of change and evolve. And I'm really proud of what we've done here in Baltimore, and certainly as an industry, because I believe the information is better. It's getting better in terms of how we gather it. We have so many tools. I believe the advertising solutions are better than ever before. We have video on our site. Many of you are in the video business. It used to be that we published once a day and it was a newspaper. Now we have all these solutions. So I think when it comes to the future, a lot of it comes down to how is the advertising going to shake out. And I think a lot of advertisers, and you all know this, are still trying to decide, where should my money go? And what works the best? And what's the best ROI? And we can really provide all of those solutions where years ago we couldn't. We could provide one. And I think the future is more, you will see news organizations continue to evolve. We essentially have our own television station on our website. We have podcasts, so we have radio stations. It's all changing. You know that our friends in television and radio, they have their own websites. So I think it will continue to change, but I think places like the Baltimore Sun will remain vibrant because we cover Baltimore. And that gets different than what we did 15 years ago. 15 years ago, we thought, well, we covered everything. We had national reporters, we had international bureaus, and we decided many years ago that we were going to put our resources into covering Baltimore and Maryland better than anywhere else because you can't get it anywhere else. You can't, and so when you think about, if you want to know what's happening here, there's not a lot of places to go. Again, we're going to cover Washington and how it affects, certainly given the federal workforce here, but we're going to cover it on how it affects Maryland and Baltimore. When you get a White House briefing, we're going to have a reporter there from our organization or from some of the wires, but we're not going to replicate that. We're going to put our resources into covering Baltimore and Maryland because, again, those are topics that are very dear to you, but you can't get it everywhere. And it's really worked for us. And so I think that's the future in terms of news organizations like ours. And I think certainly you've seen there's so much demand for news. The Washington Post, the New York Times, we know have done very well given sort of the intense interest of what's happening in Washington, and there's a lot of news there. So I think there's been this renaissance, I think, looking to the future. Obviously, I'm very focused on the business side and how we can continue to be a vibrant news operation and a vibrant business, and we are. So I get the question a lot, like, well, how's it going, and are you still going to print? We're fine. We are a healthy business. We have profit margins that would make a lot of businesses, very pleased. And so things have changed, sure, but we are continuing to evolve and to move with the economy and certainly adjust to your news habits.
And how many times do we talk about that, being able to adjust, how dynamic business is, and that's great comments. Who has some comments or questions? Antonio.
Yeah, a few comments. First of all, congratulate and commend your leadership in remaining relevant, viable, and adaptive to change.
Thank you.
So we represent, of course, a gigantic real estate group, and we have stakes stuck with you guys.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
We had a significant migration to the digital marketing campaign. My reps, I have to commend your sales teams. They came in, they did not want to lose my business, obviously. And we stuck with you through and through. Our readership, as you know, we take multiple pages in the real estate section on the weekend. But the digital marketing campaign specifically has proven to be tremendously high in ROI for us. And I like the dissection that the reps could come in. We're looking for a specific demographics in a specific area. We're looking for net affluence in certain areas, and they've done a wonderful job. So I just want to tip my hat off to you, and I'm not going anywhere.
Well, thank you.
Growing, and I think our budget keeps growing with you guys. So great job.
Well, good, and thanks for the
Testimonial.
support. We really appreciate that. Yeah, we really do. Yeah, and a gentleman in the back who opened a restaurant. I grew up in the restaurant business, and we've had a lot of restaurateurs do very well with our mobile application because if you're within 15 miles and you pull it up, you offer a special. But I learned a lot about my business by being in the restaurant business because it's a lot of dealing with people, and it's a very tough business, and certainly I just chose a much easier one by going into the news media. Yeah.
Hey, Doug,
So.
can I ask a
If
follow-up?
this chose me, I didn't choose it.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? So Facebook just had their national meeting.
Right.
Zuckerberg got grilled on the false news. I don't know.
Correct. Yes, I did. Yeah.
I was watching it. So just curious, do you ever get any inquiries made by some of the other social media sites in validating any information?
Can you repeat that for the video?
Sure. The question is, do we hear from the social media sites to validate that our news is accurate? Yeah, that really hasn't happened to us yet. I'm curious about that. We've been watching that closely, and there's a lot of partnerships with Facebook in terms of instant articles and things like that. And so our company has been engaged with them. That hasn't happened as far as I know, and I will say I think a lot of it is because it's the Baltimore Sun. I think if you see it's Baltimore Sun, you're going to give it the benefit of the doubt. I think what can be scary is if you see something that's something that sounds like Baltimore Sun or Baltimore something else, and people think that that's the Baltimore Sun, that's where, we all get sort of swept up in it and sort of judge that way. And that's the way it goes. But again, what we can do is what we can control. And what we can control is to make sure that the information we're providing is sound and that you can trust it. And if there's something wrong, that you can find someone quickly, and we can either, fix it or discuss with you, how we disagree. And again, same kind of thing with our advertising. Sort of like what kind of quality advertising. We want quality advertisers, and certainly we know that we have quality readers in terms of paid subscribers who really value what they're getting, and that's kind of the difference sometimes when it comes to paid subscribers versus non-paid. When you pay either digitally or in print, people are going to read it. And so you as an advertiser know that they're going to be engaged with it. And so certainly we have lots of success with non-paid products, but that's a different model. And so we can provide different scenarios and different vehicles for any of your businesses.
Who else has a question? Mike?
Hey, Mike Imgarden from United Source Farm. We're a food exporter up in Harford County. And actually my schooling was, I'm a J school graduate from University of Missouri. So
Oh, good one. Good school. Yeah.
Good school, and always, of course, taken a real interest in journalism and the direction it's taken now. And it is sad to see how the media in general is, you read things now, you hear things now. It used to be the editorials were separated on another page or at the end of the newscast. That's gone now. So much editorial comment within the news, and that's when I hear about fake news. I think more about how we've kind of gotten editorial comment and news mixed up. But what I'd like to know is within the context of how the model has changed, economic model has changed. Going back to the roots of journalism and really what's at the heart and soul of it all is that hard investigative journalism. How has the current economic model for journalism affected your ability to cover those types of stories?
Yeah. Now, thank you for asking that question.
Can you repeat that?
Sure. The question is, the first part was the concern about how opinion and news coverage have melded a little bit. And, that's a good question. I think sometimes it becomes more difficult online because you may see something that's clearly marked opinion, but it might be in your news feed and someone may think it's a news article, where you're absolutely right. The editorial page is the editorial page. When you're there, everything is an opinion. So that was your first part. The second part was, how do you invest in investigative? Have we been able to invest in investigative journalism, right? And I'm really proud that in 2014 we added 5 journalists to an investigative team. We had done it at the Sun, which has a long history of investigative reporting, sort of throughout the room, and we had sort of gotten away a little bit of providing sort of consistent investigative coverage, and it was our belief that it was one of the things that we could do as a news organization, a large news organization, that others can't do, that our television counterparts can't do as consistently. And we made that investment, and it's really worked out for us. And we continue to do it, and it's actually helped sort of raise the ambitions of others in the room. So it doesn't just come from the one team. But you've been able to see articles that we've done, such as the speed cameras in Baltimore that had the problems, didn't work, were inaccurate. We covered that. The city was forced to take a look at the program, and I believe it's getting ready to come out again, but they have said it will have the integrity that it will work. We did many stories about allegations of police brutality in the city police department a year before the unrest. So, sadly, when we did have the unrest here, we had the the context. We had done the work. We knew what was happening in the community. We had relationships with the police. We had relationships with those in the community, and we were able to tell those stories authoritatively, as things were happening here, as to what the relationship between the community and the police department were. We recently just did a big piece on, worked on it for a year, on segregation in the schools. We did a big forum at Loyola. We set up the forum. We weren't sure how many people were going to come. We had 300 people there. There was a real intense interest in this topic, and it's a tough story to tell. We focused on Catonsville. We focused on the city over at Henderson Hopkins. We focused on Howard County. We focused on some success in Hartford. We put reporters on that for a year, got a grant to work on it. And it was very, again, not an easy topic. And not a lot of news organizations can give that kind of time to do that. We also just we just published a piece on the inequities of the rent court system in Baltimore. Again, worked on that for a year. And so we have long-range investigations that we're diving into, but we're also working on stories that maybe don't take as long and they're built off of the news. And even just, you talk about sort of like right now you have this terrible crime wave in Baltimore. We all know about it. And there's been a lot of frustration with what's happening and, sort of how to fix it. And certainly no one can fix it overnight. But, we wrote a story 2 weeks ago where we basically put, several reporters out there for several weeks to talk about the frustration because there was concern that there wasn't enough being done at the government level. And we didn't get a lot of cooperation from the government when we did the story. We ran the story on a Sunday. I certainly heard from lots of people in the community who were pleased that we had done it, but it was hard to read it. And then that week, you started to see lots of reaction from government, and there were press conferences. And so we have really made an investment in trying to get deeper into these topics. And you're right, it's expensive, but we think it's what sets us apart. We think it's why you should invest in us, both as a subscriber as well as an advertiser. And they're not easy stories to do, and sometimes they don't pan out. We have reporters working on them, but we are completely committed to it. We're not going to give up on it. We will continue to make those investments because we think that's what that's one of our top missions and part of our core principle.
Suzanne and Hirsch.
First of all, as a long-time Sun Paper subscriber and contributor, I get the email edition, and it's great.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you like it. Thanks.
Oh, really love it.
And we're making investments to improve on it, to have video in it, and so we'll continue to upgrade it.
That's
Yeah.
great. What concerns me is this and future generations, I don't think they realize the value of a news organization. And the only news they get is sporadic, or it's so stilted by the TV stations of cable, that have their own agendas. Is the overall newspaper industry doing anything to try to educate the public in general about what is fake news, what to look for, like you're just doing right now? Is that out there? Because it's not any one single
Sure.
newspaper that should do this, but
Yeah.
I think the American community needs this now.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. We can't do enough of it. I give a lot of talks around the area. Anybody who invites me, I try and go because, typically when you explain kind of our mission, people understand it. We don't do a good enough job of explaining, but in terms of a national organization, the Newspaper Association of America. It's probably not called the Newspaper Association. It's probably called like News, the News Association of America. They've run some advertisements. We've run them to talk about that. And that's a big topic among sort of like the industry groups. But we can't do enough of it. I give a lot of talks at high schools and colleges, and I'm always really impressed by, I don't know if their teachers make them sort of study us before I get there, but I'm always impressed that, they are pretty active in what's happening. My kids they read the newspaper because they see it around the house, but they get most of their news digitally. But when anything happens in Baltimore, one of my son's in college, but when they hear things and they read it on other sites, they talk about, I'll ask them, what are your friends? Are your friends up on this? And they're up on what's happening. They're very up on current events. But you're right, I'm not sure they always know where it comes from. And I think that's something that, as we always, all of us, as we get older, come to appreciate it. I believe that, we certainly have younger readers who engage with our product, especially on the weekend, because they want to engage with the advertising. They want to shop at, where's the best deal for groceries and where's the best deal for diapers. And so I think, as you get older, we all sort of come to appreciate news. I mean, certainly when I was in college, I did read a newspaper because that was the way I got it. So I think we can continue to do it. It's a great idea. We can never do it enough. We need to continue to educate. I do believe the next generation, we're in this, I grew up sort of, you could argue, I started in the heydays of the newspaper business, in the late 80s, was kind of like towards the end of before the internet really took off. And so Steve and I were talking about this. It's like, we're sort of like trying to live in two worlds, and that's fine. I think that's exciting. But I think the next generation, as they're making sort of the advertising buys and those kinds of decisions on buying power and where they're going to put their money, I think a lot of that is going to be it's going to become more clear. But information, you need information about where your kids go to school. You're always going to want that. And we all know if you write a story that, and you're a writer, if you write a story about what happened at the school board, people know you. You can put that on Facebook. But how do you know the superintendent's going to see it if you're challenging something that you heard? I guarantee you the leaders in this community are reading the Baltimore Sun every day. They are. And certainly if they're not, if you challenge them through a letter to the editor or an op-ed, they're going to see that. And so you need those mechanisms, and I think every generation will know that. And I think it'll continue to evolve. Fortunately, we've been here 180 years, and we have a great brand. Unfortunately, people still think of us as a newspaper, and we're working on that. So I think it's going to be okay. I really feel I look at what's happened in the past year, and I think how much. I mean, whether you like CNN or not, if there's a big story happening around the world, you're going to go turn that on. That's what you're going to watch. Right. And so that's what happens in Baltimore when something big happens. What's that? Not true? Okay. Well, all right. But another cable channel, right? But another cable channel. That you've come to go to these places where if there's news, that's where you're going to go. And so you need a place that you trust. And in a local community, there's not a lot of opportunities like that, and that's why you need those investments. And again, your local publication, you can challenge, and you can say, hey, I want to talk to that reporter. You can write a letter to the editor. You can write an op-ed. And so, therefore, your voice can be heard. And you need those mechanisms, I believe. And thanks to people like you and so many others who invest in us, that's how we're able to keep doing it.
Suzanne.
My question tied right in with what Hirsch just said, and that is that I have a son who's in college and 6 kids sitting around my table one evening in the last couple of weeks, and I have been in publishing, so it's near and dear to my heart. And I said to them, so how do you guys get your news? And how do you figure out what to trust and what not to trust? And out of 6 kids sitting around the table, every single one of them had a complete apathy towards news because they all felt that it was based on the industry.
But what was the news? Where's the party Friday night? Is
Yeah,
that?
right?
Yeah. Or that they couldn't trust it, maybe. Right. Yeah.
Most of them, quote unquote, get their news from Twitter.
Right.
And then even when they get it on Twitter, they were double and triple checking to see if it was elsewhere so that it was believable.
Sure.
And I just found that to be a real change based on the demographic in this room.
Yeah.
A real change in the ability to trust news.
Yeah, sure.
And to all of them had the same comment. Well, it depends on where it comes from because
Right.
this organization's democratic and this
Right,
organization's
sure.
that. So,
Yeah.
along with what Hirsch said, how do you get to that next generation and truly help them feel confident that the news is unfair and biased, because so much of it's not.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. I think, and I think in terms of trust, we've taken a beating on that. And all I can say is that we will continue to tell the truth, to give you unbiased coverage. We do have an editorial board. Again, I think, you can get linked into, hey, everything is either conservative or liberal. But you need basic information about your neighborhood. You need basic information about where you live. People need that. We all know that. Even as everybody grows older and you get a job, you need to know what your competitors are doing. What happens if your business is doing something very well and you have a competitor that is not, and the government is not regulating it as well as it should be? Then who do you go to? Who do you go to get that information out to? You need vehicles like this. And how do we get that to, how old were the kids? 20, yeah. So obviously they're sort of at that age where they're going to be getting jobs, and obviously what they do. And then certainly if you get a job at Facebook and Facebook's in the news, you're probably going to want to read about that to find out sort of what what your CEO said and what you can believe. But you're absolutely right in terms of trust and continuing to work on that. That's something as an industry that we continue to grapple with. Lots of surveys you see come out and say, very few people trust the media. But there's a lot of surveys that say a lot of people depend on the media to hold the government accountable, and that if they're not watching the government will do things that perhaps it shouldn't. And we all know historically that always happens. When you don't have light for all, when you don't have transparency, when you don't have scrutiny to how people are spending money, to how decisions are being made, things, not all the time, but we know historically that that's when that breeds problems. And so I think as a society we'll get there. Obviously, I believe in what we do, and I see a lot of the success. I see a lot of the changes that we can make in a community like this, and I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud that we provide a voice to anyone who wants to write for our pages and challenge us, challenge somebody in government. We can check information. Also, we can ask questions that other people are afraid to ask or don't want to ask. But you make a great point. Those are things we have to continue to work at, and it's not like it was 20 years ago. You're right, the 20-year-old kids back then, it was a much different landscape, and that's kind of the terrain we're facing.
Anybody else? Wanda, and then Steve could have the final question.
I have read a newspaper for 54 years.
All right, that's great.
You're only
Thank you.
55.
What?
You're only 55. How
I
can
know.
Yeah.
I started early.
That's right. Comics, right? Yeah.
Several things. Number one, I walk to the end of my driveway every single morning and get my newspaper. Complaint.
Real paper?
Huh?
Real paper?
Oh,
Yeah.
Real paper.
Yeah.
I like to feel the paper.
Sure.
I don't like to, I do get it digitally, and when we're traveling,
Yeah,
I read the
sure.
paper when we're out of town. Firstly, I hate the advertising of the front page that's the third of the page.
The Spadia,
whole
that's what
page
it's
of the
called.
back.
Yes, yes.
I love ShopRite's coupons.
Oh, good. That's good.
It's
That's good.
aggravating.
That's right.
It's aggravating for an old-time newspaper writer. But how do you keep your reporters so that everything is, and we're not slanted to the
Sure,
right or to
sure.
the left?
Yeah.
Many times we say, you read that paper, they're always about,
Right.
so negative.
Right,
or
right.
Whatever. How do you, obviously as editor-in-chief, are you responsible for reading everything prior to
Yeah.
issuing the paper?
I try to, because it's kind of one of the perks of my job. I get to read it first, so I kind of like that. I'm a news junkie, and I grew up in a news junkie family, and so I try to. Sometimes, I've been with you all for the past couple of hours, so there's a lot of things on the website that I haven't read, and I might read something at 5 o'clock, and we may have a paragraph in there that I might think is a little too slanted. And so we do have editors really good editors who we challenge reporters all the time. I'm really proud of the standards that we have. With the internet, things are getting online quickly. So maybe 10 years ago, 4 people read it before it went up. Maybe that's not happening as much. An editor's always reading everything. I think we work really hard to make sure that we have both sides of the story. Obviously, these are human beings, so you can't pretend there's no bias. But that's why you should have other other editors to say, hey, wait a minute, how should we look at that? Or is that worded the right way? Is it, do we have enough context for the other side? Is this story too pro-Trump? So you'll laugh because everybody say, you'll never be pro-Trump. But well, I'll tell you, I have to tell you something now. I have to tell you. Here's how I know we're doing our job well. This is Maryland, so we're a blue state. So I have gotten complaints that we are working really hard to make Governor Hogan and Trump look good. So I've gotten complaints about that. Now, certainly I get other complaints that say we work really hard on making the Democrats look good. So I know when I get complaints from both, we're doing something right. That's kind of my goal. We take that really seriously, but I think this question is very good, that you may see an editorial that's going to be in tomorrow's Sun in print that is against something that the current administration is doing, current presidential administration. And somebody might read that, and I've seen the comments, and they're like, how come you guys are so biased? It's an editorial. It's marked as an editorial, but people don't see it that way. And that gets to your point, which is a great one. It's in your news feed, and you think it's a news story. I don't know how we combat that, as we keep trying to make sure we say it the right way. Fortunately, when I see the comments, there's people underneath saying, hey, look, this is an editorial. This is different than, did you read their story that's linked that says this, and it has a good quote in there from the Republican administration as to why they're doing this. We're not perfect. We need people to challenge us. People do. We always look at it. I read all the letters. I do, again, try to read pretty much everything. I do take days where I'm like, tomorrow I'm going to read the feature section like everybody else. And so there are, and listen, there's times where I'll read something and it's already printed, and I'll say, hey, here's how we could have done it better. And that's our job, to keep doing that. And I talk to people like you all the time who are like, hey, you had this story and you were wrong, and here's what you need to do. And I have a lot of people who reach out to me privately and say, hey, you need to look into this, or you guys said this and I think you didn't dig deep enough. And and certainly that's the beauty of transparency. Lots of people can call me and they can be I can guarantee them anonymity. Nobody has to know where I get it from. I don't have to tell my reporters, exactly where my source is. I say, hey, I heard this, let's check it out. And that's important. You need that sort of effort. What concerns me, and I said it earlier, is when you have government officials sort of going after people who are whistleblowers and things like that, which we need in this society for certain things. And you can't have sort of that chilling effect where you're afraid to talk to a reporter about, it's like, I believe nothing should be a secret, and I say that, in the right parameters. But if it can withstand scrutiny, then all the better. I think, what are we afraid of? And I get it. I'm in business, and there's trade secrets, and I understand all that. But most of the things we're doing, we're covering government decisions, and this is all important things. And we have lots of people covering Washington, but we have fewer people covering city halls and state houses and, and town. And Baltimore Sun is completely committed to that. And we have, and again, that's our mission. And we will continue to kind of put those resources there because we know that's very important. So one more thing, I'm sorry. The Spadias, I get this question a lot, and some people think it's really creative, and I'm glad you love the ShopRite coupons, because so do I. That's good. Yeah, and so those things have been around since like the 1800s. It's really interesting.
He hasn't been around that long.
So anyway, it's obviously a very popular advertising tool, and it works. And so
How long have you all been using it? It's not for like 20 years or anything.
seems like it came back about 10 years ago, Seems like,
10 years ago,
yeah.
that's what
Yeah, they
it all.
really work for advertisers.
Yeah.
They love them.
Yep.
And I know sometimes, but that's why we make it really easy to take off.
We talk about it all the time. You think about back in the 90s, sort of, that. I remember as a kid, I tried to sell my bike in the Sun papers, and I had to call. My dad had me call, and I could, I think it cost like $30. And I was like, wow. And I remember my dad saying, well, how else is everybody going to know that your bike's for sale? And obviously the world has changed. Classified advertising has changed. I mean, real estate advertising has changed. Automotive advertising has changed. It's really, and again, I'm really proud of how we've evolved. And so my job is, because I get the question all the time, like, well, nobody reads newspapers. That's not true, but if you say it enough, everybody thinks it. But again, I'm looking at it as news organization, and we have all these different outlets and different ways. But I implore you to watch, when you watch 6 o'clock news, and I have a lot of friends there, but you're going to get, 5, 6 stories. You're going to get so much more, and a lot of those stories you probably would have read in the Sun first, and and it's good that we have competitors and they keep us on our toes, and when they have a story we don't have, we get on it. So that's all good. Competition. I believe competition is good, but we have, thanks to you, we make all these investments, and we cover the 5-county area. We cover the city heavily. It's obviously a very important economic center. And so many of our lives and our businesses touch it. But you're not going to find a lot of coverage, even video coverage of Towson, except from us, the Towson Times, Harford County. And these are important, there's a lot of things happening out there, and we're making those investments. And that's why you need a vibrant news organization like ours.
Because Triff won't say this, so coming from the TV world, I can say this. When he just said a lot of them you would see in the Sun first, the reality is the TV stations get them from the Sun and then dispatch their reporters to do it. So this was, in TV you have assignment meetings in the morning and then again in the afternoon, and I can tell you, which they would never admit, everybody's got a Sun or maybe on their tablet or whatever, but they're seeing, oh crap, the Sun has this, get it.
And I think thank you for saying that. I think that becomes really important with all news options, and that was a great question. But the news options, a lot of it's repackaged. And if we're not there to do it, I'm telling you, it's not going to get done. And that's why we are going to keep going. And, we're going to keep having good, advertising solutions for people. And we really feel proud of it. And, and it'll continue to change. And, again, if you think we're too liberal, call and tell me. That's okay. You won't be the first, so that's all right. Okay, thanks. But if you ever see it,
Which is my final question.
Yeah.
Many of us are bitter, frankly, with the media.
Yeah.
And news in general.
Yeah.
Over the last 5 to 10 years, many of us who would never dream about watching Fox News,
Yeah.
now that's all we ever watch.
Yeah.
Sadly, many of us who would never dream of reading Breitbart now read Breitbart, which is like, are you kidding me? The Drudge Report. This is, for years, I read the Washington Post, Baltimore Sun, New York Times, and I've thrown them all away. Because the reality is, what I see, maybe you can help comment on this, is what's the difference between reporting the news and making the news?
Sure.
And that fine line that we're very bitter, that you say you're nervous that there's no sort of estate to watch government.
Right,
What's
sure.
the fourth estate, the great
Sure,
estate
sure,
that
right.
watches government. We're
Right.
nervous that the reverse is happening, that the media is creating a destructive to our democracy in general. It's
Yeah.
the exact opposite that's happening. Can you comment on that? I know that you got.
Yeah, sure.
You got 1 minute left.
Sure.
On that profound thing.
Yeah, well, let me just start with, I hope we can convince you to not throw out the Baltimore Sun, because I think if you look at the coverage, the news coverage, I think you will be satisfied. I think you will be able to say, hey, there's a news story about mental health in Baltimore, and quite frankly, who else is going to cover health in Baltimore? And you want us to do that. You have competitors, and you need to know what's happening, and government contracts, and all those kinds of things that are out there. You need us to do that, and I don't think you'll find sort of a news story that's biased. Maybe we try hard not to do that. Now, in terms of, I'm with you. I watch Fox News, I watch CNN, I watch MSNBC. I try to get it all because Ted Koppel was in town for a speaker series, and he asked the question, who listens to Rush Limbaugh? And not a lot of people around the table. Not a lot of people around the table. It wasn't for news, but it was, but not a lot of people raised their hand. He said, well, you should, because a lot of people are listening. It gives a different perspective, and we have silos. I think I don't think we make the news. I think there is a lot of opinion in the news media in terms of creating editorials, op-eds, here's what I think, trying to essentially get people to read it, provocative headlines. I think that happens a lot. I think we all get lumped into it. And I think it's great that you have found alternative source, because you weren't satisfied with what you were reading. But I think what's happened with the media, I think about this all the time. I go home and I watch the cable channels, and it used to be that there would have like 5 or 6 reporters where they would go out but now it's like they have 5 people sitting around talking and saying, here's what I think, and that's very inexpensive. It's very inexpensive, and you just have people on there, somebody wrote this book, and they have this perspective, and they all talk about, and it's like, you're supposed to have one opinion, you're supposed to have another opinion, and that's what people want these days. I guess, I'm not in the cable television business, but I can tell you, I know what people want from us. Now, we have an editorial board, we've had one for 180 years, we've endorsed candidates, all that kind of stuff. And certainly you could argue we're too liberal. That's fair. We work really hard to have op-eds from conservative voices as well. But we spend a lot of time to send reporters out there to cover news, not create news, to cover it and to say, hey, here's what's happening right now, and hopefully we point out something that you didn't know, or give you something to say, hey, wait a minute, why is the governor saying this? They're missing out on that, and hopefully they call a reporter and say, you missed this part of the story. That's kind of the big chunk of what we do for a living. And all the opinions and all that kind of stuff really popular right now. We've always done it. But you're not going to. I'm not going to put 5 people on the front page every day to say, here's what I think. You won't see that. You're not going to see that at the Baltimore Sun. So I implore you, give us another chance. We'll talk to you afterwards. We got a great deal right now, digitally, all that stuff. But my point is, but it's fair, and I appreciate when you challenge us on that. That's fair. I appreciate when this gentleman says, look, I don't watch CNN, and that's fair. I don't know everything, and I do believe in sort of trying to read it all. I can't read it all, but it is really important to make sure that you're getting all points of view. It used to be that maybe you just read the Baltimore Sun and we thought we were giving you all points of view, and maybe we missed something there. But we're in the news information business, and we're here to hold politicians and community leaders and others accountable and to provide a voice to you, even if you don't agree with us.
And you heard it here, folks. Challenge number 1, challenge number 2 at a later time. Great job.
Thank you.